Hi, this is Roger. Thanks for dropping by. Sunday morning chat today is going to be based around the theme of successes and failures. We're all going to have some of both and lots in between. But how do you judge? Well, the ultimate failure is your plant dies. It doesn't get any worse than that, does it? But the biggest thing to know is, or estimate or work out or try and understand why it died. Now, if you've taken a plant that's quite precise in its environmental requirements and put it in something totally different, well, that's down to you. And there are some that do like quite precise environmentals to actually even live, let alone grow well. And yet others are quite tolerant. You know, I mean, you can have something that's classed as a warm to hot grower, and it never sees those sort of temperatures, and yet it still grows, it still lives, and may well even still bloom. So many are more tolerant of those environmental conditions than you might think, and some just are not. Knowing the difference between the two is just down to your own research. Just find out as much as you can, you know, Google the plant name, see what comes up, dig into what comes up, have a look. You know, sometimes you get things come up on the list of just somebody's personal account of their struggle with an individual species to actually get it to grow and bloom. And you'll get tips in there because they've already done the struggling, which hopefully stops us having to. So the ultimate failure is the death of the plant, obviously. Another failure can just be that you picked the wrong plant. Not necessarily your fault, but I do recommend, certainly with species anyway, that you do a bit of work before you actually go and get it. Not go and get it, bring it home, and then try and find out what you're going to do with it, if you see what I mean. Because you might find you've picked a dud one as far as looking after it is concerned. Successes, how do you judge success? Well, your plant's still alive, it's the bottom line. Some orchids are difficult to grow and keep going. You know, they might last a couple of years and then they start going downhill and eventually just keel over. You know, these things are there, you know, in amongst it. Sticking to one's types that you've already got that are doing well is an easy way. Yeah, so if you started with some Phalaenopsis and they do really well for you, then you might even be reluctant to venture out and try some other sorts. But once you understand that your Phalaenopsis are doing okay and why, you'll find some other types of orchids that will do well for the same reasons. Then you can start diversifying and getting a few different ones in. I mean, to me, a sea of orchids that are all the same type, to me, would be boring. I mean, I do like a challenge. Otherwise, that would also get boring. But, you know, and I venture out, I try and pick on a new genus every now and again. I haven't had any before. But I do the work first. You know, I go and find out, well, hang on, these grow like this one. And that one doesn't do bad for me, so we'll give it a go. But it's usually work first, buy second. I still get caught up now and again and think, oh, that's a smashing looking orchid, must have that. But I've got enough experience nowadays to at least know what type it is and know whether it's going to fit in here or not. You know, size may even be a consideration, although some of the things I've got in here, you can't imagine that I ever worked out how big it was going to get. Otherwise I might not have got it. But I consider anything down in amongst here, with the exception of the Paphiopedilums, a success on the grounds they're still alive. Everything in here likes to stay cool, relatively shady, with very high humidity. Well, I can't provide that exactly as I've just said it. Yes, I can provide the shady bit. Just stick big plants up above them. That does the trick. And this time of year, the light comes in from high. Yeah, so that does provide shade. In the winter, it doesn't. The sun comes in through the sides in the winter. But in the winter, the light levels are low. The sun's weak, so they do okay. That's, you know. But I mean, my humidity in here very rarely drops down much below 70%. As an average, that's brilliant. But for these, that's often not enough. Now in cooler temperatures, that humidity level's fine. But once those temperatures start climbing like they do through the summer, practically everything down in here struggles. And its way of handling it is to just slow down or stop. They stall in the heat. So they stop growing. They don't die, but they stop growing. So you lose some energy being put into the plant by not producing new growths and the associated new roots. They just go on hover for a while. And then come the autumn time, they all burst back into life again, because daytime temperatures are lower. And the relative humidity is then good enough. I consider being able to grow Deesas in here and get them to bloom a success. Strictly speaking, these should be outside now. If they go outside, I can virtually guarantee at some point or another they'll get forgotten, they'll dry out and they'll die. In here, they never get forgotten. And they did okay last year, they bloomed, and they're doing it again this year, despite not being repotted. So I class that as a success, that switching to that genera and being able to cope. I mean, when I bought those, I bought one little pot full at Malvern, I think. Liked the bloom, wanted to try Deesas, and when I repotted it, that one pot full became 3. Next time I repot, it's probably going to become even more. And these will have to go. You know, I don't want a whole shelf full of the same Deesa. I want some different types of Deesa, which is, there's a plan in hand, which may come about, may not. Non-bloomers. If you understand why, like you just cannot give it enough light. What did I once have that's a notorious one? Not the Brassavola nodosa, but one like that, a notorious, you know, needs so much light that in the UK you've got a job to achieve it. My closest thing to that, because I lost my nodosa, is this one. This is Little Stars. Now this was bought as a reasonable size plant without a good root system. It had some, but they weren't good. And there was some damage to some of the new growths. If you look at the right of the shot there with the cinnamon on the end of it, there's one there. And it was reluctant to start growing, but it bloomed. And this was a classic example of the plant did nothing while it was in bloom. As soon as the bloom spikes came off, it went mad. I've got new growths coming out all over the place. Yeah, and it's totally regenerating a root system, so no complaints. So a success. But for me, that was almost an inevitable success. I was expecting that plant to do that. So all that really was doing is doing as expected. But even that sometimes fails miserably. But that one lives up there, which gets Vanderlight. This is the only part of the grow room that gets the highest light level because the shade netting stops there. So over here, the only shade from the sun is that bubble wrap. That's the brightest light anything can get in here. And it's just 3 plants get that light, just the 2 Vanders and this one. But I have an option. If I get a notorious non-bloomer that it's deemed is just not getting enough light to bloom, I still got some room up there, if I ever get one of those. My Laelia purpurata might have to come into that category, but it's going to get one more year. It's on the high shelf up there. It's that monster on the right-hand side on the top shelf. And it's pushing up 2 strong new growths. And if it's going to perform as it should do, according to all the writings I can find, those 2 new growths should push on through the summer months and form a sheath. Now, it's never done that before. It's pushed on the new growths, but not necessarily at the right time of year. And this plant did come from Equigenera, so it came from the southern hemisphere. Yeah? So it may have literally taken a couple of years to get itself into northern hemisphere seasons. You know, when you get the brightest light and the longest days in the summer months. Well, in the southern hemisphere, that's back to front, isn't it? To a degree. Anyway, so, you know, that at the moment is a non-bloomer. I think I know why. It needs to mature its latest growths through the growing season and form the sheaths. So if that happens, it can then be rested and the buds should form. So I know what to do, but the plant's got to help out there. Without the sheaths, the buds aren't going to come. And the sheaths are renowned for forming at the end of the growing season, followed by a rest. So I'm working on it. But it's not what I'd call a success. It's a success as far as growing a strong, healthy plant is concerned. I mean, it's a beauty. But no blooms yet. Here's a major success. I've forgotten what the hell it's called, and it won't have a tag in it. God, I've just totally gone blank. Encyclia cordigera. I'll get there in a minute, I think. Yes. Now this was stalled and going downhill. This was starting to shrivel its bulbs and was far from happy. So I did a bit of work on it and found out that this particular plant hates to have a soggy base, and therefore a soggy media underneath it where the roots would be. It needs a very fast wet dry cycle. So I took it out of what it was in, cleaned it all off. I had virtually no roots on it by the time I put it in its... let me just shut that off for a minute. It's not necessary at the moment. We've got a cooler, dull day. That's just because I've had the door open to the lounge and the drier air's come in. That's all it is. Where did I get to? Yes, so I ended up with virtually no roots. I sat it on top of some large chunky bark in a holy clay pot, and it's now growing. It's now doing what it should be doing. Got new growth coming up in many places, and it's totally regenerated a root system. So that's a real success. But the reason it failed was my own fault. Not doing the work, not doing the research, and potting it up in an unsuitable media. So I have to carry the can for that. That's nobody else's fault. I can't look up and say, well, somebody told me. It's up to me to find out. And not necessarily believe what somebody else tells you. They could be wrong. Yeah, so I mean, that's a major success. I've now got a healthy, growing plant with a good root system. And I would imagine that once some of these new growths mature, I'll get some blooms, because I haven't seen blooms on that plant for a hell of a long time. And quite honestly, the state it was in when it was repotted and rethought about, I was lucky to keep it. That could have been one of those failures where the plant died, quite easily in that case. I only just got that in time. What else? I suppose you could call this a success of sorts. That's all right, you have to excuse me waggling the camera around, but I haven't got things down. This was a freebie when I bought a couple of plants a while ago, and don't ask me what it's called because it's got a very strange name. I'd never heard of it, and I did a bit of work on it. It's a cool grower, likes to stay moist. So you say to yourselves, why is it sitting on a mount with totally dry moss underneath it? It's because I haven't watered yet today. That's why, because I'm filming for you lot. I've actually got my cooler plants, this lot and here, need watering today. They can't go another day. And all my mounts need doing. All they got yesterday, when they should have been watered, was a spray. And the spray just doesn't water them properly. It'll keep them going, stop them, being too dehydrated, but it's not the same as really giving them a good soak. But that's a little success. I'll do a pop-up for what that thing's called. There's no way I've memorised that yet. Now, I would suggest all of my Latorias during last winter were a miserable failure. All of them, the whole lot, went down. Most had lost their roots. Some of them had rotted some new growths off. I did a bit of work on that, and my grow room is not suitable for them. Now, when I got them, I thought it was. But what I'd failed to appreciate was my low temperatures in the winter, combined with what I'd potted them in. So again, my fault. I potted them up on the basis that in their normal growing environment, they might slow down a little bit in the winter when the rains ease off, but they wouldn't stop growing. So I treated them as continuous growers and potted them up in small bark with quite a bit of moss. And what happened in my winter was it got cold. They stopped growing. Yeah, too cold for them. And combine that with a media that was taking absolutely ages to dry off, they lost their roots. They gave up. And I've had to start them again. Now the starting again process is having some success. I mean, that poor little thing there that lost nearly all of its leaves, it's now growing. Yeah, I've now got one large new growth, another one behind it, 2, 3, 4, 5 new growths, and it's just starting to recreate its root systems. I mean, that was the state of the roots, those bits sticking out there. They were just gone. So that's a success, but the failure was my own fault in the first place. So that's that one's coming on now. Some of the plants are not in their right place because when I spray my mounts, some of them have to be taken down from where they are, mainly this lot, because they drip all over my wooden top. But in amongst these are some of the Latorias. This little one here, now that's got a lovely strong new growth on it, but so far no sign of any new roots. But it's working on it. It will get the new roots down the line. I know enough about my own plants to know that will now recover. There's another one here. What's this one up to? Now this one's up to next to nothing. I can see no new roots on this one and no new growths yet. So this one's yet to respond to coming out of its soggy pot. But then this one hasn't got bad roots. Oh, and this isn't a Latoria anyway. Forget that. It's because it's in the wrong place. That's actually the Fleckery, the Aussie one, and that is doing okay. Yeah, that is doing okay. Where are the other Latorias then? There was another one I wanted to... Oh, a new, not a new genus, but a new type of Dendrobium I decided to try was the Cuthbertsonii types with their lovely crinkly leaves. Now this is a cross, this isn't pure Cuthbertsonii, but this seems to have taken to its mount. It's got quite a few new growths that are starting to push on, and existing canes are starting to open those little new leaves that were with it, and it looks like it's about to open its second bloom. So they seem to be doing okay, and they shouldn't be. I'm pushing my luck. Cool growers must never dry out. I mean, if you take this little one up here, must never dry out. That moss is dry, but it's growing. There are some new leaves on some existing canes and some new canes just starting, and a couple of new roots, so it's hanging in there. But it's never going to do brilliantly in here because it's going to dry off. What about this then, this Victoria Regina? Now this was nothing when I got it, quite honestly. It was suggested that if I strap the long cane on top of moss, it may shoo some kikis out and associated roots. Well, if it didn't dry off each day, it might do. But that's not how it's working at the moment, because it stays upright and the moss dries off each day. But the tiny little new growth is pushing on. So I've got something. I've got a new growth, and underneath that little new growth are a couple of roots. So it's going to grow. It's not going to die. But it's not going to be happy for the next 3 months because it's too warm. It's a cool grower. Yeah, so it's not going to be happy. But hopefully it will survive and push on. Yeah. What else have we got? Oh, that's the Latoria I thought I was picking up just now. Now this one, virtually all the roots. There's the old roots. These things hanging down here. That's what I had to work with. Next to nothing. Now what we've got here is bursting into life. Lovely strong new growth pushing up to the right there. Several others pushing out. In fact, there's another 1, 2, 3. and new roots. So I've got 4 new growths and a new root system. And on top of that, the stupid thing's decided to push a spike out on a really old manky cane that to all intents and purposes looks rotten. So it's going to bloom. Silly little thing. Anyway, it's coming back to life. That's the main thing. Slowly but surely, but it's doing something. What else have I got? Oh, I noticed this morning. Now, I'm not cheering. I'm not going to suddenly do a little dance or anything like that. But, hang on, I'll have to move a couple of things. You can get out. Oh, this, while I've got it in my hand, this was the Lindleyi that I got. Normally called aggregatum, but quite honestly it shouldn't be. It's Lindley's dendrobium. And where the hell aggregatum came from, I don't know. But I'm going to call it Lindleyi because I like it and it's a new plant for me. This is pushing out some new roots, but it's got a failed new growth here. One failed and the other 2 over here didn't. So it's now grown its latest 2 new growths, larger than anything else on the plant, with 2 nice healthy leaves. And a shed load of new roots coming out from that area on the plant. Now, because that's a new plant, that might not grow any more new growths this year, but it might do. So a success in as much as it's establishing itself as a new plant. So coming on. This is a big success because I thought I'd lost this. Now, okay, it was only a kiki, but like an idiot, I let it bloom and took the strength out of it. This is my Comet King. It's a nobly type. And we've got some roots coming out of the old cane. We've got a nice new growth coming on and a new root system generated. So it will now grow. That latest new growth may not reach full size this year, but it'll establish a root system underneath it, which means the next new growth will, even if this one doesn't. So that's on the road to mending. I thought I'd lost that, so again. Now this thing, as I said, I'm not going to cheer and dance, not yet. This is this Bulbophyllum sycamense that I've had for years. And it keeps pushing out lovely things, and I keep hoping that they're going to be spikes. And all the time it's been new growths. That is not a new growth. That is a spike, at long last. I know what's going to happen now. Hopefully it doesn't blast, it does perform, and it's going to bloom. That needs to be pretty special, or this is on its way out. It's not a prolific bloomer, and there's no way that plant's not blooming size. It's been blooming size for years. Grows well, has expanded in a colossal amount since I first got it, and it's still doing it. But if that bloom isn't something a bit special, then I won't want that anymore. Yeah? But the challenge was to get it to bloom. And there's a saying, if you've got a plant that doesn't seem to be growing very well or doesn't seem to want to bloom, carrying on doing the same thing over and over again, well, nothing's going to happen, is it? If you want to push a plant to do something, you need to change something. And what I did with this was put it up there in the light. Now, that doesn't guarantee. Most people say if a plant won't bloom, well, give it more light. That's not always the answer. Sometimes it wants more heat. Sometimes it wants a lot less heat because it's struggling in the temperatures you've given it. So it's stressed, so it doesn't bloom. Yeah? These are the things you have to work out for yourself. Hopefully with some internet help. But it looks like that Bulbophyllum's going to have a bloom. And as I said, it needs to be pretty flippin' special or it'll be on its way out. It's been around far too long. If it was a prolific bloomer, then I'd be happy with it, even if the blooms weren't that special. You know, I'd still be happy with it. What else have we got? Actually, I'll leave it at that. Because strictly speaking, instead of filming, I should and looking at these and thinking how dry they are, I should be watering them. And I have got quite a bit to do out here today. So, I mean, this would be classed as a success, as a spike. You know, this is sweet memory. Got another new bloom just opened back here. It's got 3 open, another one opening. and plenty more buds to come. The spike's a success, but the plant's not. Plant's a mess. It's lost 2 leaves relatively recently, and the 2 leaves I've got are not that good. This is a pale coloured leaved Phalaenopsis. The leaves on this one are pale. They don't go that deep green that a lot do. It is a pale coloured one, but it shouldn't have patches of lots of different colours on it. So the plant's not a success, but the spike is. That could be its death throes. Last chance. One of my major failures is my Psychopsis. An atrocious looking plant. But the success on this one was getting it to produce a new growth, albeit not a good one, and recovering a spike that totally dried off. That was in bloom a while ago, and it's going to bloom again. So I've managed to save the spike. And basically, that one's not grown for the plant, it's grown for the spike and the perpetual blooming. So as long as it keeps doing that, I'll put up with Mr. Ugly down here. And the only other thing, there's a couple more Latorias that were in a very sorry state. This one got split into 2. The lower portion is growing new roots, but hasn't started a new growth yet. The top portion has started a nice new growth and is growing some new roots, so it's recovering. It will make it. As I said, when I when I mounted this lot, none of them got tags, and yet this one, this goes down as, at the moment, a failure. There's very little left of the plant. That dead bit sticking out there is not a stumpy bit of root, but directly above it, above that tiny little new root, is what was a new growth, and it's failed. So that now has no new growths and only one tiny little root poking out. This one might not make it, but it's trying. At least it's trying. Unfortunately, its first try was a miserable failure. So, maybe that one won't make it. Maybe it will. But I'm not giving up on it yet. I don't very often give up on a dendrobium, I must admit. Oh, it's the fans coming on now. That is a good time to stop. My Rhynchostylis giganteas, I class these as a failure because I can't get the flipping things to bloom. But since I put the lava rock in there and gave myself something that probably weighs about 4 pounds in actual gross weight, I've now given myself something that's really good at falling on other stuff and shattering it and breaking it to pieces. But both of these plants have got a new leaf. And it has greened up a little bit. So, I'm still probably not going to keep it. It doesn't do enough for me to warrant that thing. It's always in the way. Wherever it is, it's in the flipping way. So anyway, successes and failures. Some are of our own making. Some are just a bad choice of plant. Like I said, it does pay, especially where the species are concerned, to do your homework first, or blend one in with others you've already got that are doing great, if you see what I mean. I'd have no qualms about buying a Tolumnia hybrid of any shape, size or form, because I know my Tolumnias do okay, and they bloom and they grow. So I'd add another one in. I'd be wary of a Tolumnia species though. I'd need to check that one out first. Is there anything different about this species, or does it just grow like the rest do as a twig epiphyte? Yeah? So a little bit of homework perhaps there. I would always check a Dendrobium species before I got it, because in amongst the genus Dendrobium are so many different requirements, from cold growers right up to hot growers, to deep shade up to literally almost full sun all day long. So you've got to know what you're getting into before you get them, preferably. So successes and failures. Don't let your failures be your own fault if you can help it. I know it's very easy to do the pretty blooms must have. We've all done it. We'll all do it again, I expect, including me. But just try and tailor your impetuous nature of grabbing everything that's got a pretty bloom on it and stop and think, is this going to do okay where I'm growing it? in my environment. And if you end up with quite a few failures and you think it's your environment that's the problem, well, carrying on doing the same thing over and over, like I said, nothing much is going to change, is it? There are things you can do to help with your environment. Get that humidity up to a better level. Get a bit of air movement. Adjust lighting by moving plants. Yeah. Obviously, if your light's coming in through a window, there's not a lot you can do. But you can move your plants around, you know. So, yeah, environment first, plants second. And we do what we can. I mean, I'm lucky I've got a closed-off environment where I can control it pretty well. And if I wanted to put the expense in, I could actually change my minimum winter temperature from 12 to 16. And there'd be some plants in here would go, whoopee, because they'd be much better off. But then there's others that would not like it at all. My resting dendrobiums would probably bloom nowhere near as well, if at all. It's not cold enough for the ones that I've got. Yeah, so we have to balance and jiggle and shuffle stuff around and all that sort of stuff to get the best of the world that we've created. Because at the end of the day, the world we've created for our orchids is a long way from the real world where the species would have come from. A long way from that. Yeah, but we do what we can. So anyway, see you next time and good luck with your orchids. But put the thought in. And if you get a failure, try and understand why. And don't forget, you can just buy a bad plant. You know, you can't carry the can for failing to rescue what was a bad plant in the first place. But the art is to try not to buy that bad plant in the first place. And that's not always easy, you know. Most vendors are not like you, turning their plant upside down and taking the pot off and all the media falling all over the floor. They're not going to be very happy with that at all. But you know, we do what we can. And I'll see you next time. Thanks for dropping by.